Revenge with Karen. You really think bots have feelings? Brent snorted, tossing my annotated test results onto the table like I'd handed him a grocery list written in crayon. I just stared at him. Not because I was shocked. Brent's whole personality was basically a walking LinkedIn post wrapped in Axe body spray. But because behind that smirk, he had no goddamn clue what he'd just greenlit. The bot, his precious, overhyped AI solution, just misclassified 3 separate contract clauses from our top enterprise clients during a sandbox demo. Instead of flagging them as proprietary, it treated them like user facts. Think, can I reset my password? Next to renewal terms for $6.2M annual licensing. It was like watching a toddler juggle knives while everyone clapped. And before we get too deep, real quick, 97% of y'all binge these stories without hitting that subscribe button or dropping a like. I get it, commitment's scary. But it keeps our little team going like cheap coffee and corporate gossip. So click that thing, yeah. All right, back in. I'd been at this company for 21 years. I onboarded our first Fortune 100 client using a flip phone and a fax machine. I'd migrated their systems across 4 CRMs, survived 2 acquisitions, still remembered where the bodies were buried in the codebase. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't loud, but I knew our enterprise architecture better than I knew my own living room and the ghosts living in both. So when Brent swaggered in 6 months ago, fresh from some failed AI startup that burned through its series in record time, I knew what was coming. Every damn time a new golden boy showed up with buzzwords and a Tesla, someone like me got labeled legacy. Not loyal, not essential. Just legacy, the corporate kiss of death. The first red flag was how fast he moved. Within 3 weeks, he was pushing a chatbot pilot to replace our Tier 1 support reps for enterprise clients. Not consumers, not SMBs, enterprise. That's like swapping the cockpit of a Boeing for a Roomba with a walkie-talkie. I asked twice if the bot was designed to parse internal tags like confidential, do not send, or contractual only. Waved it off. The model's trained on best practices, he said, which is Silicon Valley code for its duct taped together with hope and vibes. Still, I tried to play ball. I reviewed the AI's test logs. It was confusing placeholder text with live data. It scraped metadata from internal training docs like they were Reddit threads. During one session, it offered client hash 2 a support escalation path that hadn't existed since 2019. I logged every issue, dropped them into our shared team doc, and pinged the dev channel with clear, timestamped screenshots. I even bolded the worst examples. No reply. Then came the Slack message. After tagging Brent for the 3rd time with a note, the chatbot misidentified an NDA clause and offered it as advice to an external user. He finally responded. She thinks bots have feelings face with tears of joy that emoji hit harder than it should have. Not because it was mean, because it was lazy. It told me everything. He didn't see me as someone to argue with or even correct, just someone to mock. I watched that message sit there, quietly accumulating emoji reactions from his little flock of product managers. One even added a crying laugh. Another just typed lol fr. The next day, he said it out loud to the CTO, in the middle of a demo, with me sitting 3 feet away. Was pointing out that the bot's auto-tagging feature had misrouted 2 legal queries to our general support queue when Brent chuckled, leaned back, and quipped, "Diane thinks bots have feelings. We're working on empathy protocols next." The CTO laughed, not because it was funny, but because Brent was the rising star and I was the faded constellation. That's when I started the folder. I named it just in case. Inside, it went every Slack thread, every ignored email, every test log with anomalies. I saved everything, timestamped it all. I even screen recorded the demo session and filed it under PR disaster waiting to happen. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I've seen enough golden boys fly too close to the server rack. And I knew this one was headed straight into the blades. The morning after the demo, I walked into the office and found a post-it on my monitor. "Fun seeing you yesterday." Grinning face with smiling eyes, Brent, like we were just coworkers joking over bagels, not a walking HR violation away from him doing stand-up at my expense in front of the CTO. I peeled it off and stuck it in my notebook, not because it meant anything, but because by now, everything was evidence. That afternoon, I added a new entry to our shared project doc. Observed metadata discrepancies in sandbox logs, enterprise labels being scraped as user-facing content. I listed timestamps, pasted sample outputs, and wrote in plain English. This could leak proprietary information to public support threads. Strongly recommend disabling auto-tagging on all enterprise accounts until this is resolved. 5 minutes later, Brent reacted to the comment with a damn laughing emoji. No follow-up, no review, just that same smug dismissal, now digitally branded onto my warning like it was some inside joke. 30 seconds after that, I got a Slack ping from him. She thinks bots have feelings face with tears of joy. I stared at it for a full minute. My hands were still on the keyboard, but I couldn't type. I wasn't shocked anymore. This was just procedure now. You raise a red flag, and they throw a parade for the person who ignored it. Instead of replying, I clicked copy message link, pasted it into my private folder, and moved on. Later that week, Brent hosted another dog and pony show for the exec team. It was all projection slides and buzzwords like intelligent enablement and workflow liberation. I sat in the back, sipping lukewarm coffee and trying not to grind my molars into powder. At one point, the CTO, Michael, a guy I'd once trained on our legacy ticketing system, asked whether the AI could identify contractual red lines in client escalations. Brent launched into his usual techno-magic spiel, tossing in phrases like semantic flexibility and contextual drift detection like he was seasoning a casserole. Then he dropped it again. Of course, Diane here thinks the bots have feelings, he said, pointing his thumb over his shoulder toward me. We're still waiting for it to cry during client escalations. The room laughed. Not a hearty laugh. Not even a real one. That fake corporate chuckle people do when they're not sure who's getting fired next. The CTO didn't laugh. He looked down at his tablet and started tapping. I didn't say a word. I just looked at the new PM sitting next to me, some poor girl from Colorado who'd been with the company 3 weeks, and I watched her eyes flick from Brent to me like, oh shit. That was the moment I knew. No one else was going to say a goddamn thing. The next day, I ran a manual check on the AI's logs. Took a while, since they were mostly being handled through Brent's new dashboard system, which prioritized visual graphs over actual readability. But buried in the logs, I saw it. The AI had scraped metadata fields labeled client confidential and internal only, and flagged them as suggested responses for Tier 1 support. I took a screenshot. I created a new folder inside just in case and called it metadata mishandling. By the end of the week, I had 5 examples. By the end of the next, I had 14. None of them should have even touched a public-facing response system. The bot wasn't just dumb, it was dangerous. It was like giving a toddler access to nuclear codes and saying, don't worry, it's learning. I flagged the issue again in the internal Slack, this time tagging the AI team lead and Brent both. I wrote, these labels are critical. Some of this data is covered under NDA. We need to implement hard fails for enterprise-tagged fields or roll back the deployment. Brent replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. Just thumbs up. No comment. No acknowledgement. Just a corporate pat on the head before he skipped off to his next brainstorming session, probably about AI-powered lunch menus or whatever the hell was trendy this week. That night, I logged in from home and downloaded all 14 screenshots. I backed up the chat logs. I made 2 copies of the team doc, one local, one cloud. Then I poured myself a glass of boxed Cabernet, opened my laptop, and added a new line to my private notes. Brent publicly mocked risk warnings twice. AI is scraping enterprise-only tags. No mitigation in place. Deployment still scheduled. This will burn. I hit save, and I waited. 2 weeks later, I walked past the conference room and saw the lights on, Brent's voice echoing through the glass like a podcast no one asked for. Half the product team was inside, crammed around a whiteboard covered in half-erased jargon. Zero-touch triage, elastic workflows, auto-empathy engine. I kept walking. My badge didn't open that room anymore. I found out about the rollout from Noah, junior dev who still triple-checked his SQL queries and hadn't yet learned how to pretend he wasn't scared. We were by the coffee machine. He looked both ways before whispering, hey, Diana, are we really replacing Tier 1 support next week? My stomach dropped like someone cut the elevator cable. Next week, I asked, too sharp. He nodded. Brent said it's going to be a quiet rollout, just for the top clients. Limited visibility. Internal eyes only. Of course, quiet like a car crash muffled by a corporate NDA. I thanked him, walked back to my desk, and opened my private folder. Just in case had been growing like mold under wallpaper. Time to give it a spine. I created a subfolder, Rollout. Inside went everything I had: screenshots, Slack threads, metadata logs. I dragged in the PDFs from Raj's bug reports. I exported the system's internal test alerts, even screen recorded my own Slack interface while replaying the conversation where Brent typed, "Just push it. What's the worst that could happen?" The man had the strategic foresight of a raccoon in a dumpster fire. Around the office, morale was split. Half the team was terrified and quiet about it. The other half wore matching company hoodies and called themselves Team Future. Brent started referring to the bot as our fourth musketeer. Meanwhile, our 3 Tier 1 reps, Jessica, Mateo, and Lena, were all reassigned. That's how Brent phrased it: reassigned to impact-neutral initiatives, which meant shoved into meaningless side projects so a chatbot with the processing power of a nervous squirrel could take their place. No farewell emails, no transition meetings, just gone. The rollout plan hit my inbox accidentally through an old distro list I hadn't been purged from yet. Subject line: Launch Calendar V3, Q3 bot-only pilot. I clicked it. Thursday, 9 a.m. We'd be replacing human support for our top 3 enterprise clients, the accounts that built this company. These weren't mom-and-pop Shopify plugins. We're talking 8-figure annual contracts with multiple compliance layers, legal reviews, security audits. These companies didn't ask questions, they sent subpoenas. I stared at the screen for a while. I got up, walked outside, sat in my car, and screamed into the steering wheel. Then I went back in and got to work. I started running mock interactions through the bot using anonymized test cases. Half the time it hallucinated answers. The other half, it confidently suggested steps that would breach contract protocols. At one point, it told a simulated finance user to try resetting the root permissions using default admin credentials. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my tea. I archived those too. By Wednesday, I wasn't sleeping. I brought in a thermos of gas station coffee, so strong it could strip paint. Every interaction with Brent went into my folder. I set up a screen recorder on a side monitor, always running, always watching. I even changed my Slack settings to auto-archive messages every night. At one point, Raj, our last remaining cautious dev, messaged me, "You still backing all this up?" I replied with a single word: everything. That night, I printed out the key Slack thread, the one where I warned Brent, in writing, that the bot was scraping NDA-covered contract language from the sandbox and had no label sanitation in place. His response was the one that made me finally see what I was dealing with. "Diane, no one's gonna sue us over chatbot phrasing. Stop clinging to the past." I read it twice. I highlighted it. Then I scanned it into the folder. The next morning, I wore black slacks and a blazer, my quiet version of armor. Brent rolled past my desk at 8:57 a.m., AirPods in, not a care in the world. I watched him walk into the conference room and slap hands with someone I didn't recognize, probably a new intern he'd made AI strategy liaison or some other garbage. By 9:04, the AI was live. And by 9:11, it had already logged its first conversation with a real client. I watched from my dashboard. I saw it happen. And as the bot's cheerful, unmonitored responses flowed onto the screen, I reached over to my keyboard, clicked record, and said, just loud enough to hear myself, "This is gonna hurt." Friday morning, Raj cornered me by the fire exit, holding his laptop like it was a bomb someone had just handed him. "Diane," he whispered, "you need to see this." Ducked into the supply closet, yes, the actual supply closet, and he showed me the log files. Thousands of entries scrolling down the screen like a Vegas slot machine from hell. Chatbot transcripts, every conversation, every client query, every confidential escalation, all stored in plain text. I squinted at one line: "Client, please confirm if Clause 9.3b applies retroactively per our NDA." Bot: "Yes. Clause 9.3b applies as outlined in your signed agreement from May 2021. Grinning face with smiling eyes, no scrub tags. No encryption. No access restrictions. You're telling me this data is sitting in a raw log file on a shared instance?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He nodded. I flagged it. Brent said it's just for QA purposes. He said not to alarm people with dev-level panic. My hand twitched like it wanted to slap someone. I said, "Listen to me, back up everything, encrypt it, personal cloud, external drive, bury it in your damn backyard if you have to, but do it quietly. If Brent finds out, he'll throw you under the next passing bus." Raj was young but not stupid. He nodded, pulled his hoodie tighter like it was body armor, and slipped back into the hall. I walked back to my desk and stared at my screen. My pulse was drilling behind my temples, the way it used to before we lost the Atlantic Health contract in 2015, except this was worse. Back then, it was human error. This time, it was programmed negligence. I opened Outlook and drafted my final warning to Brent. Subject: Final Risk Alert AI Data Exposure. Brent, as previously flagged, the AI is storing live enterprise queries, including contractual language and NDA-covered terms, in plain text. This is not a sandbox. These are real clients with legal teeth. We are in violation of our own compliance policies. Enterprise accounts are not toys. This needs to be paused immediately. Diane, I hovered over the send button for a full 10 seconds before clicking it. 10 minutes later, I got his reply, Final Risk Alert AI Data Exposure. Worry less, Diane. You're not our target market anymore. That was it. No greeting, no punctuation, just condescension compressed into 6 words like a passive-aggressive bullet. I stared at the screen, waiting to feel angry, but there was nothing. No rage, no sadness, just focus, like the moment before a power outage when everything in the room holds its breath. I opened Just In Case and made a new folder, Final Warnings, dragged his email in, took a time-stamped screenshot, saved both to a mirrored external drive. I pulled every relevant approval file from the past 3 weeks, deployment orders, system checks, Slack sign-offs, even his own internal memos with lines like client-facing language will adapt dynamically with AI tone packs. Tone packs. Jesus Christ. At 6:42 p.m., I zipped the archive, encrypted it with a 32-character key, and backed it up to my personal drive. I didn't name it something obvious, a /vault/railroad47clean, a dumb internal joke no one would ever decode unless they'd been on the 2010 data migration team. By the time I shut down for the night, the office was empty. The lights were on motion sensors, and everything around me was still. The only sound was the soft hum of Brent's bot quietly scraping through another batch of enterprise tickets, making decisions no one had authorized, learning things it wasn't supposed to know. I walked past his glass office on the way out. His jacket was still on the chair. His coffee had gone cold. His whiteboard said, Q3 Vision, full automation equals full liberation, underlined twice like a prophecy from someone who'd never been burned by firewalls or audit trails. I paused, pulled out my phone, snapped a picture. Not for revenge, for the record. Then I walked out, locked my badge behind me, and let the building go quiet. It happened at 8:46 a.m. on a Friday. I was sipping the watery coffee from the second-floor break room, the kind that tastes like regret and printer paper, when my Slack pinged 5 times in rapid fire. Notifications from channels I hadn't touched in months. Legal, Tier 1 support, client ops escalations. At the center of it all, one message from the AI. Hi. As per your May 2021 contract renewal, Section 9.3b covers data residency exceptions. Let us know if you'd like a copy of the signed amendment. Grinning face with smiling eyes posted publicly. On our community-facing support forum. No authentication. No login required. Just there, open as a roadside billboard. Attached was a full thread, timestamps, client identifiers, and a direct quote from the redlined contract PDF that should have never seen daylight. And the client #1, our oldest, biggest, and most notoriously litigious whale. The same client whose onboarding folder had 3 separate NDAs, a pre-signed arbitration clause, and a line item in our budget marked their lawyer's lunch preferences. Slack was already on fire. Someone had tagged #everyone in legal. The message had been deleted after 12 minutes, but cached copies were floating around like digital landmines. Screenshots. Archive links. One panicked comment from a rep just said, "Can someone please confirm if this is a prank?" I checked Brent's status. Brent, him. Beach working remotely today, focus time. Of course he was. I didn't speak, didn't move, just clicked over to the AI logs. The system had flagged the exchange as low-risk client support. It had detected a tone mismatch in the original inquiry. The client had used the word concerned, decided that meant they needed cheer and clarity. The bot responded accordingly, with full contractual transparency and a damn smiley face. At 9:11 a.m., the first internal incident ticket was filed. Severity level 2. By 9:17, client #2 had discovered their data, too. Different forum thread. This one even worse, reference numbers tied to internal pricing tiers and projected usage bands for Q4. A kind of leak could tank stock movement. By 9:23, client #3 had contacted their account manager directly. I saw the email chain, subject line all caps, breach discovery, immediate response required. Then came the phone calls. You could hear them through the walls. Someone in legal was yelling, "I don't care if it's machine generated. The NDA covers output, not just input." Meanwhile, Brent was silent. No Slack messages, no video calls, not even a vague emoji, like the man had vaporized. At 10:02 a.m., I got a message from Raj. They're asking if the logs are still live. I replied instantly, yes. But not for long, back them up. Now. He just responded with a white, heavy check mark. I pulled up my backup, every file, every thread, every exported Slack conversation where Brent ignored red flags, laughed at the risk, and signed off on rollout. I didn't upload it. Not yet. But I laid it all out like knives on a table. By 10:45, the CTO finally called a crisis huddle. Half the room looked like they hadn't slept. One of the account managers was visibly shaking. Someone had printed the AI thread and circled the smiley face with a Sharpie so hard it had bled through the paper. Nobody could reach Brent. His calendar said focus, sprint AI integration strategy. That slot ended at noon. We sat in the blast radius and waited. At 11:13 a.m., the legal team drafted a statement. A masterpiece of nothing. We are aware of an isolated miscommunication incident involving our AI pilot program and are investigating the matter with utmost urgency. Isolated. By then, 5 different AI replies had surfaced online, scraped and shared by people who didn't even work for us. And still, I said nothing. I didn't gloat. I didn't whisper, "I told you so" to anyone. I just kept my head down, kept my screen recorder running, and waited for the next domino to fall. Because the disaster had begun. And the only person holding a map to the wreckage was me. Brent finally showed up Monday morning, button down, half-wrinkled, hair gelled with the desperation of a man trying to outpace a subpoena, rolled in with a paper cup of matcha, and the sweaty energy of someone who'd spent the weekend rehearsing how not to say my fault while sounding helpful. At 9:03 a.m., we were all summoned to post-incident optimization sync. Translation, public execution, light on snacks. We crammed into the conference room. The air was thick with fear and cinnamon air freshener. Brent stood at the whiteboard like a motivational speaker, 3 steps from a breakdown. Marker in hand, bullet points already scribbled. Contextual misfires, legacy system, conflicts, comms, gaps. Look. He started, putting on that performative PSI manager's use when they're about to commit treason. What happened Friday was obviously not ideal, but we've traced the issue to some legacy workflow echoes that weren't properly deprecated. Basically, there were overlapping triggers between the old support infrastructure and the new AI flow. Legacy workflow echoes. That was his new phrase for me. His tone was casual, but every eye in the room flicked toward me like I was a glitch in the Matrix. Like the leak was a ghost of some outdated process I'd selfishly failed to exercise. Then he dropped the real dagger. We're doing a retro on why certain risks weren't elevated more assertively. We can't improve if issues get soft flagged. Soft flagged. You mean the 14 warnings I posted with timestamps, Slack receipts, bug logs, and handwritten arrows the size of your ego? My jaw tensed, but I didn't speak. I just looked at the projector light flickering against his forehead and thought, you really don't get it. You still think you can talk your way out of this. When the meeting broke, I walked, slowly, calmly, back to my desk. Didn't say a word to anyone. Just opened just in case. Found the Slack thread labeled Police Car Light Diane AI Risk Flag Contract Leakage Brent reply and exported it as a PDF. It was the conversation where I'd written, client contract data is not protected in current logs. This is a direct risk under Clause 4.1 of our client data policy. AI must be paused. And Brent had replied, this isn't court, Diane, it's tech. Let it learn. I opened the company archive system, found the secure internal drive labeled /exec/internal/CEO/private reports. I uploaded the PDF without commentary. No subject line, no email, just the file. Title, Diane Enterprise AI Risk Flag Final PDF timestamped. Signed, let the system speak louder than I ever could. Then I sat back and exhaled, not relief, just control. Slack was buzzing again, but one thread caught my eye. Raj had gone silent. Oh, green dot. No response to dev pings. Nothing since Friday night. That wasn't like him. I messaged, you good? No reply. I knew what that meant. He'd seen where this was heading. He was doing what smart engineers do when the walls start closing in, shrink into the crawl space and pray no one drags them into the blast. Smart kid. At 11:34 a.m., a new thread appeared: Brent damage control, narrative suggestions. Brent had added comms, legal, product marketing. The first bullet point: frame Diane's documentation as preliminary and incomplete, suggest clearer process pipeline moving forward. That was it. No more mercy. I opened a new folder, Brent Fallout, and I started dragging files. The emergency all-hands was scheduled for 3:00 p.m., but by 2:45 the company chat was already melting down. People were canceling meetings, slipping into the auditorium like they were headed to a wake. No agenda, no title, just one line in the calendar invite: accountability plus next steps mandatory attendance. I walked in last, didn't rush, didn't straighten my blazer. I sat dead center, 3 rows from the front. No laptop, just a pen. Let them wonder. The CEO, Greg, took the stage looking like he'd aged 10 years over the weekend. Normally he opened these things with a joke or a company value. Not this time. He stepped to the mic, scanned the room, and asked one question, no preamble, no buffer. Who approved this rollout? Silence. Not even the sound of shifting chairs. He let the pause hang long enough to turn breath into anxiety. Then, who signed off? I want the name. The document, the thread, now. Brent wasn't in the room. Of course he wasn't. He'd been working remotely all week, probably chewing through antacids in his overpriced kitchen. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't stand up. I just opened Slack on my phone and typed, "Hi Greg, here's the relevant approval thread. Timestamped. Includes deployment greenlight and ignored risk warnings. Diane attached. Brent authorization chat 3.21.23. PDF." He opened it right there on his tablet. I watched his face freeze at page 2, the part where Brent, after I laid out the risks in bulletproof detail, typed, "Just push it, what's the worst that could happen?" Underneath it, one of Brent's PMs had replied with a gif of a space shuttle taking off. That exchange was now the entire company's re-entry burn. Greg scrolled to the end, then closed the tablet. He didn't say my name, didn't thank me, just looked back out over the room and said, "Everyone return to your desks." Further instructions to follow. Meeting over. Message hit Slack 16 minutes later. Brent will be unavailable for the rest of the day. A formal update will follow this evening. But we all knew what that meant. By 5:30 p.m., his profile had vanished from the company directory. By 6:12, an internal memo landed in our inboxes. Effective immediately, Brent Walker has stepped away from his role as VP of Product Strategy. Stepped away. Like his shoes caught fire and he just politely exited his body. The Slack channels were quiet. Not relieved, not triumphant, just still, like a house right after the tornado leaves and no one's sure what's left standing. I didn't gloat. Didn't reply to the 5 private messages that said, "Holy shit," or "You did it." I just archived the final transcript into the folder, zipped the drive, and labeled it closed. Not because I was done, because the truth finally spoke louder than the branding. The next morning, my badge didn't work on the second floor. I stood in front of the scanner, half dreading that I'd been reassigned like Jessica and Mateo before the bot swallowed them whole. But then the facilities guy, Kevin, the one who always whistled Radiohead while pretending not to eavesdrop, poked his head out of the stairwell. "Hey Diane," he said, grin crooked, eyes tired. "They moved your office. You're on 4 now." 4, that was exec territory. I took the stairs, not because I was impatient, but because I needed the air. My hands weren't shaking, but something under my ribs was thrumming, low and steady, like a warning bell that hadn't realized the fire was already out. 4th floor smelled different. Less like burnt coffee and stress sweat, more like carpet glue and filtered air. My new office was smaller than the old one, but had a window. Desk already cleared. Posted on the monitor read, "Welcome back. You were never gone." No signature, but the handwriting was CTO Michael's. He showed up an hour later. No announcement, no pre-meeting. Just tapped on the doorframe and leaned in, holding a paper cup like it was penance. "I owe you," he said. I didn't say anything. Just turned the monitor slightly so he could see the rollback protocol I'd started sketching out, reinstating Tier 1 reps, revising AI access controls, building hard gates into enterprise routing. Michael nodded slowly. "You saw it all coming." "No," I said, "I saw it weeks ago." He exhaled through his nose, ran a hand through his hair. "I read your Slack logs, all of them. I should have stepped in." "You didn't," I replied, soft but flat. "Now we're here." Another nod, then, would you be willing to advise on the rollback already started? He looked at the screen, the folders, the clean naming conventions, my usual, left without another word. By noon, legal forwarded me emails from all 3 breached clients. Client #1 had written, "We would like Diane to serve as our direct liaison during post-incident protocol." Client #2, "We are only continuing with services on the condition Diane oversees our account transition." Client #3, a simple line, "Diane, or we walk." For the first time in months, my inbox was full, and none of it was garbage. No HR trainings, no team uplift Fridays, just actual useful questions that didn't begin with emojis. I didn't respond right away. I took my time. I crafted replies. I laid out action steps. I CC'd exactly the right people and no one else. Control. By 4:00 p.m., my name was on a new internal team, enterprise recovery plus compliance integration. Catchy, stupid, but the work was real. Ordered a corkboard and a small coffee machine for my new office. Pinned the old post-it Brent left me, the one that said "Fun seeing you yesterday." Grinning face with smiling eyes, Brent, to the board like a trophy in reverse. Not to gloat, just to remember. Then I turned back to the monitor and kept working. The memo dropped at 9:02 a.m. sharp, CEO signature, legal watermark, distribution list longer than most onboarding docs. Subject, organizational realignment and leadership transition, no warm-up. No inspirational quote. Just the guillotine drop, effective immediately. Brent Walker has stepped down from his position as VP of Product Strategy. The board and executive team have reviewed the events surrounding the recent AI rollout and determined that procedural safeguards were ignored despite internal warnings. Then, 2 sentences that stopped every Slack thread cold. Attached is a timestamped record of ignored risk assessments submitted in advance of the deployment. We've learned that listening to expertise is not optional. It's essential. The attachment was mine, my Slack log, my flagged warnings, my bullet points, my receipts. Brent's "just push it, what's the worst that could happen," was now memorialized in corporate canon. A line that would follow him to every job interview until the end of time. The cherry on top. Someone, I don't know who, but I'd buy them dinner, had taken a screenshot of the memo header and Brent's response, and posted it in the company-wide #watercooler channel with the caption, "What's the worst that could happen? Exhibit A." I watched the reaction emojis pile up like a car crash on the freeway. Skulls, flames, the infamous clown emoji, and my personal favorite, the chef's kiss. No one said my name. No one had to. Opened my private folder just in case. Scrolled through the dozens of files. Every warning, every red flag, every conversation I'd backed up in the dark while Brent was out there building his sandcastle on a tied schedule. Then I hit delete. Not just dragged to the trash. Wiped. Folder gone, like it had never existed. I closed all windows, locked my keyboard, took one final sip from my chipped thermos. Then I stood up. I was meeting Priya, head of client #1, for lunch. Her calendar note had read, "You've earned this, sushi's on me." And for once, I believed her. As I walked down the hall toward the elevator, I passed Brent's old office. Door open, chair empty. Whiteboard wiped. No nameplate. Just a faint square where it used to be. Inside, the intern who'd been hired as AI process assistant 3 months ago was hunched over his screen, eyes wide, typing like he was defusing a bomb with 2 paperclips and a prayer. I paused in the doorway, raised one eyebrow. He looked up, saw me, looked back down immediately. Didn't say a word, didn't dare. I smiled, not big, just enough. Then I walked away. Lunch was waiting. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.